So apparently, ruining your husband's career presentation with lingerie evidence is frowned upon in corporate America. Who knew? There I was, standing in a glass-walled conference room in the Seaport District, holding a pink silk camisole like it was Exhibit A in a murder trial, which, professionally speaking, it kind of was. 6 executives in Brooks Brothers suits stared at me like I'd just set off a fire alarm during earnings call. My husband Hugh looked like he'd swallowed his own tie. And Clarice, sweet, ambitious, 28-year-old Clarice, turned a shade of white that matched the expensive letterhead on the table. But let me back up, because the real story? It started 3 weeks earlier in the most mundane way possible. A canceled meeting in Minneapolis. My name is Vera Hartwell. I'm 34, a senior M&A consultant who spends more time in Delta Sky Clubs than my own living room. And until exactly 21 days ago, I thought I had mastered the whole having it all thing. Marriage of 7 years to Hugh Cross, private equity VP with the kind of jaw that photographs well at charity galas. We had the Back Bay apartment with exposed brick, the joint Peloton account we both ignored, and that Instagram perfect life where we'd occasionally remember to post date night selfies with captions like, "Still my favorite human." Spoiler alert, I was very much not his favorite human. I found out on a Tuesday. Because of course, life-altering discoveries happen on Tuesdays, the universe's most mediocre day. My client meeting in Minneapolis got canceled last minute. Something about their CFO having a family emergency, which in corporate speak usually means got caught embezzling or forgot it was his anniversary. Either way, I caught an earlier flight, landed at Logan at 4:30 p.m. instead of the next afternoon, and walked into our apartment expecting to collapse on the couch with leftover Thai food. Instead, I found evidence that Hugh had been doing some creative collaboration of his own. It was subtle. That's what made it worse. The apartment looked normal. Dishes in the sink, his gym bag by the door, that depressing pile of mail neither of us wanted to deal with. But our bedroom? Our bedroom smelled like perfume I didn't own. And when I pulled back the duvet to change the sheets like a functional adult, there it was. A pink silk camisole, size petite, designer label I recognized from Newbury Street. Definitely not mine. I'm a solid medium, and my lingerie budget goes towards sports bras, not whatever Victoria's Secret fever dream this thing came from. My first thought was practical. Well, that's interesting. My second thought was consultative. I need more data points. Because here's the thing about being in M&A. You learn to investigate. You learn to find the hidden debt, the offshore accounts, the sketchy board members with 3 DUIs. Compared to corporate fraud, tracking a cheating husband is basically an entry-level assignment. I didn't confront him. That's what amateurs do, scream, throw things, storm out dramatically. No, I went methodical. I checked the iCloud calendar we shared, the one Hugh never bothered password protecting because he assumed I was too busy closing deals to care about his schedule. And there, buried between client lunch and gym, I found something labeled Strategic Meeting, Conference Room B, Seaport District, Thursday 2:00 p.m. Hugh worked in private equity. I knew every single one of his client offices, the ones in Financial District, the ones in Cambridge, even that depressing suburban office park in Burlington where they analyzed manufacturing companies. This address? Generic co-working space. The kind startups rent when they want to look legitimate but can't afford real estate. Why would Hugh have a strategic meeting in a WeWork knockoff? Then I remembered. We installed a Ring camera in our living room 6 months ago after the concerned neighbor email about package thefts that turned out to be one stolen Amazon envelope containing beard oil. Hugh insisted we needed security. I agreed because sure, why not document our thrilling evenings of watching Succession reruns? I pulled up the app, scrolled back 2 weeks, right around when I'd been in Atlanta closing a healthcare merger. And there she was, time-stamped at 6:47 a.m., Clarice Dunham, 28-year-old junior analyst from Hugh's firm, walking out of our bedroom hallway wearing the exact same pink camisole, carrying her heels, doing that morning-after walk of shame directly past our camera. Clarice, the one Hugh mentioned maybe twice in 7 years, the one who'd posted on LinkedIn 3 weeks earlier about working late on a critical deal, Same night Hugh texted me saying he was stuck in due diligence meetings until midnight, the one currently listed as attending the mysterious seaport meeting. I downloaded the footage, took screenshots, printed 3 high-resolution images showing her face, the timestamp, and that unmistakable pink camisole. Then I put everything in a folder labeled Q4 Analysis, because irony is important. Thursday morning, I told Hugh I had a site visit in Waltham, kissed him goodbye like a good corporate wife, watched him leave in his Tesla wearing his important meeting suit, the canally one he reserved for impressing senior partners. Then I called an Uber to the seaport. The co-working space was one of those aggressively modern places with industrial lighting and inspirational quotes on the walls like, "Disrupt everything," and "Fail forward." I took the elevator to the 8th floor, found conference room B, and watched through the glass walls as Hugh delivered a presentation to 6 executives I vaguely recognized from firm events. Quarterly performance metrics on the screen, coffee and pastries on the credenza. And there was Clarice, sitting at the table like she belonged there, taking notes on an iPad, playing the role of competent junior analyst, the role she'd apparently been playing in my bed for weeks. I waited until Hugh hit his stride, somewhere around EBITDA projections, when everyone was pretending to pay attention. Then I opened the door. Didn't knock. Just walked in with my Longchamp tote and my best resting consultant face. The room went silent. I walked directly to the head of the table where Barrett Sinclair sat. 60 years old, former Marine, managing director with a reputation for firing people over missed decimal points. I reached into my bag, pulled out the pink camisole, and placed it in the center of the polished mahogany table like I was presenting evidence to a grand jury. Then I laid down the 3 printed photos. Clarice's face, clear as day. Our bedroom hallway, unmistakable. That pink camisole on her body. Timestamp, 6:47 a.m., October 7th. The silence was so absolute I could hear the HVAC system humming. Barrett looked at the camisole, looked at the photos, looked at Hugh, whose face had gone from confident presenter to cardiac event imminent, looked at Clarice, who'd frozen mid-note like someone hit pause on her life. Then Barrett looked at me and said very slowly, "What is happening here?" I smiled. The kind of smile you give when you've just checkmate someone who didn't realize they were playing chess. "Good question, Barrett," I said, keeping my voice pleasant and professional. The same tone I used when explaining to clients why their acquisition target was actually a financial dumpster fire disguised as a growth opportunity. I found this in my bed after returning early from Minneapolis 3 weeks ago. And I found these. I tapped the photos with one manicured finger. On our home security footage. Hugh, you want to explain whose camisole this is? Or should we let Clarice confirm it's hers in front of everyone? Hugh's mouth opened. Nothing came out. He looked like a goldfish having an existential crisis. Clarice, to her credit, made a decision quickly. She stood up so fast her chair rolled backward into the glass wall, grabbed her iPad, and bolted from the room. Her heels clicked down the hallway, at a pace that suggested she was either running for the elevator or planning to throw herself down the stairwell. Barrett's jaw tightened. The other 5 executives, men in their 50s who'd probably seen every variety of corporate scandal, sat frozen like they were watching a documentary about terrible life choices. "This is a business meeting," Hugh finally managed, his voice cracking slightly. "Vera, this is completely inappropriate." "Inappropriate?" I let out a laugh that could strip paint. "Hugh, you brought your mistress to a client presentation. I'm just returning lost property. You're always saying I should be more thoughtful about your work commitments." One of the executives, gray-haired guy I recognized as the CFO of some manufacturing portfolio company, made a noise that might have been a suppressed laugh. Barrett silenced him with a look that probably made junior analysts wet themselves. "Mr. Cross," Barrett said, and the temperature in the room dropped about 15 degrees. "I think we need to reconvene this meeting. Without you." Hugh's face went from pale to tomato red. "Barrett, I can explain." "You can explain to HR," Barrett interrupted. "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Bring your lawyer if you want, but I suspect you're going to need a better one than whoever handled your prenup." He looked at me. "Mrs. Cross, I apologize for whatever. It's Ms. Hartwell professionally, I corrected pleasantly. And no apology necessary. I just wanted to make sure Hugh's work wife got her things back. Hate to see company property go missing. I picked up the camisole with 2 fingers like it was evidence in a crime scene, which, morally speaking, it was, and dropped it in my bag. Gentlemen, I'll let you get back to your EBITDA projections. Hugh, my attorney will contact you about separating our assets. Try not to sleep with her, too. I walked out before anyone could respond. The Uber ride back to Back Bay took 17 minutes. I spent 16 of them on the phone with Gwen Mercer, the most ruthless divorce attorney in Boston, a woman who once made a hedge fund manager cry during mediation and got her client the summer house, the boat, and the dog. Gwen answered on the first ring. Vera, please tell me you have documentation. Video footage, timestamps, witnesses to a public confrontation, and his employer's managing director as an inadvertent character witness. I love you. We're filing Monday. How vindictive do you want to be? Scorched earth. I want him to remember this divorce every time he signs a check. Music to my ears. Send me everything. I hung up and immediately opened LinkedIn. Hugh's profile still said, Vice President, Private Equity at Barrett's firm. Give it 48 hours, I thought. That title would either disappear or change to Seeking New Opportunities, which is LinkedIn code for Got Fired for Astronomical Stupidity. Back at the apartment, I started packing. Not frantically, methodically, the way I'd close out a deal. I took photos of every room for documentation. Removed my grandmother's jewelry from the safe Hugh thought I didn't know the combination to. Downloaded 7 years of bank statements showing exactly which accounts had my income versus his. Forwarded myself every email where Hugh had made financial decisions without consulting me, especially the one where he'd invested $40,000 in his buddy's revolutionary crypto startup that immediately tanked. Then I opened my laptop and composed an email to 3 recruiting firms I'd been ignoring for months. Subject line, Open to Senior Leadership Opportunities. Within 2 hours, I had callback requests from all 3. One was particularly interesting. A boutique M&A advisory firm in the Seaport. The kind of place where senior consultants became partners if they brought in enough business. The kind of place Hugh's firm competed with. The kind of place that would absolutely love hiring someone with my client relationships and Hugh's firm's confidential market knowledge fresh in her head. Petty? Maybe. Strategic? Absolutely. My phone buzzed. Text from Hugh. We need to talk about this rationally. I typed back. We needed to talk rationally before you started sleeping with someone young enough to think Snapchat is a valid form of communication. Now we talk through attorneys. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Disappeared. Finally, Clarice meant nothing. I laughed out loud in my empty apartment. Then you destroyed our marriage for nothing. That's somehow worse. Don't contact me again unless it's through Gwen Mercer. I blocked his number. Then I blocked him on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, every platform where he might attempt some pathetic reconciliation speech he'd probably workshopped with his therapist or, worse, his boys from business school, who'd tell him this was all salvageable if he just communicated better. That evening, my phone started blowing up. Not Hugh. He'd apparently learned that lesson, but everyone else in our social circle who'd somehow already heard. Because Boston's professional class operates like a small town, and a dramatic confrontation in a glass-walled conference room travels faster than insider trading rumors. Text from Paige, my former college roommate. Did you really confront Hugh in a meeting? Text from my cousin Lila in Newton. Mom just heard from her book club that Hugh got fired. Is that true? Text from Noelle, Hugh's college friend's wife. I'm so sorry. Also, I always thought Clarice was sketchy. That last one made me snort. Noelle had literally hosted Clarice at a dinner party 2 months ago and spent 20 minutes telling me how refreshing it was to meet young professionals who really cared about their careers. Hindsight apparently came with revisionist history. I responded to exactly none of them. Instead, I poured myself a very large glass of the burgundy Hugh had been saving for a special occasion, ordered delivery from that Thai place on Newbury Street, and started drafting my new LinkedIn summary. Something about driving transformative M&A outcomes and building strategic partnerships. The kind of corporate word salad that actually meant, I'm available, I'm connected, and I just burned down my old life, so I've got nothing to lose. By Friday morning, Barrett's firm released an internal memo. I knew because 3 people forwarded it to me before 9 a.m. Effective immediately, Hugh Cross is no longer with the firm. We wish him well in his future endeavors. Corporate speak for, we fired him and he signed an NDA so he can't sue us. And Clarice got promoted to a strategic opportunity in the Kansas City office, which is what happens when you're too junior to fire without legal complications but too toxic to keep in Boston, Kansas City, the place where careers go to die quietly while pretending it's a growth market. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, just that strange empty calm you get when you've methodically solved a problem. Monday morning, Gwen called. Hugh's attorney wants to negotiate a settlement. But what's he offering? 50-50 asset split. He keeps the Tesla, you keep the apartment. Counteroffer, I keep the apartment. He takes the Tesla and his half of the furniture, and he pays my legal fees for wasting my time with infidelity. Done. He'll take it. His attorney knows he has no leverage. And just like that, 7 years became a transaction. Assets divided, accounts separated, marriage dissolved. Clinical. Efficient. Exactly how I'd close any other deal. Except this one came with a pink silk camisole I still had in my bag, waiting for the perfect moment to donate it to Goodwill with a note. Free to a good home. Previously worn by someone with terrible judgment. Turns out, publicly destroying your husband's career is excellent for your own professional brand. Who knew? 2 weeks after the conference room incident, I had 4 job offers. Not inquiries, actual offers with compensation packages that made my current salary look like an intern stipend. The boutique M&A firm in the Seaport, Sterling Advisory Partners, offered me a senior director position with a 40% raise and a partnership track. They wanted someone with my client relationships, and, let's be honest, they were thrilled to poach talent-adjacent intelligence from Barrett's firm. I accepted before they could reconsider. My first day was a Tuesday in late October, because apparently all significant life events happen on Tuesdays in my world. The office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor, that new money smell of leather furniture and expensive coffee, and a managing partner named Desmond Wright, who'd built the firm from nothing after leaving Goldman Sachs with enough client relationships to start his own shop. He shook my hand in his corner office that first morning and said, "Vera, I'm going to be direct. We hired you because you're brilliant at M&A. We're keeping you because apparently you're also brilliant at corporate warfare. Barrett Sinclair called me personally to say you have more strategic ruthlessness than half his senior team. Should I be offended or flattered?" Flattered. He meant it as a compliment. Also, he's referring 3 clients to us specifically because you're here now. So, whatever you did in that conference room, it worked. I smiled. I just returned lost property. Very civic-minded of me. Desmond laughed. You're going to fit in perfectly here. He wasn't wrong. Within a week, I'd closed a deal I'd been cultivating for months at my old firm. A healthcare merger worth $80 million that my former employer had been courting unsuccessfully for a year. The client, a sharp-eyed CEO named Ramona Patel, told me during our closing dinner at Trade Boston, "I only signed because you moved firms. Your old shop felt like they were going through the motions. You feel like you've got something to prove." "I do," I said, raising my wine glass. "That divorce lawyers aren't the only ones who can take someone for everything they're worth." Ramona clinked her glass against mine. "I like you. Let's work together again." Meanwhile, Hugh's life was imploding in slow motion, and I had front-row seats thanks to the Boston Professional Gossip Network that functioned better than LinkedIn notifications. First, the apartment. Per our settlement, I kept it. Hugh moved out on a Saturday in early November. Showed up with 2 guys from Craigslist and a U-Haul to collect his half of the furniture. I wasn't there. I'd deliberately scheduled a client meeting in Providence so I wouldn't have to watch him pack up 7 years into cardboard boxes. But my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, elderly woman who'd lived next door for 30 years and missed exactly nothing, texted me updates like she was providing live sports commentary. "He's taking the couch. The ugly one you hated. He's arguing with the moving guys about the TV. He just tried to take your Nespresso machine. I told him I saw you buy it. He put it back. God bless Mrs. Chen. When I returned that evening, the apartment looked empty but cleaner somehow. Like removing Hugh had eliminated clutter I hadn't realized was there. His protein powder arsenal gone from the kitchen. His collection of finance books that he'd bought to look smart but never read gone from the shelves. That depressing rowing machine he'd used exactly 4 times gone from the corner where it had served as a very expensive clothing rack. I walked through each room, mentally cataloging the absence. Then I opened a bottle of champagne I'd been saving. The good stuff, Veuve Clicquot, and drank it straight from the bottle while sitting on my newly spacious living room floor. Not because I was celebrating, because I could. The divorce finalized on a Wednesday in mid-November. Gwen called me at 10 a.m. from the courthouse. It's done. He signed everything. You're officially divorced. How did he look? Like he aged 10 years in 3 weeks. Also, he's driving a used Honda Civic now. Apparently, the Tesla lease was in the firm's name and they took it back when they fired him. I actually laughed. Hugh loved that Tesla. He'd bored me senseless for months talking about its acceleration and autopilot features like it was a personality trait. What's he doing for work? Contract consulting. Some second-tier firm in Burlington. According to his attorney, he's rebuilding his professional reputation, which in normal person speak means nobody reputable will touch him. And Clarice? Still in Kansas City, according to LinkedIn, though apparently she's engaged now. To a guy who works in agricultural finance. I'm sure that's going well. Agricultural finance in Kansas City. That's just cosmic justice. Vera, you won. Decisively. Enjoy it. I hung up and stared at my laptop screen. Divorce decree finalized, assets separated, marriage dissolved, 7 years reduced to a legal document and a PDF in my email. I should have felt something. Relief, maybe, satisfaction, victory. Instead, I felt like I'd just closed a complicated deal. Tired, competent, ready for the next thing. My phone buzzed. Text from my cousin Lila. Heard the divorce is final. Girls' night this weekend? You, me, Paige, wine, and trash talking? I smiled. Only if we're doing it at that new wine bar in Cambridge. The one with the charcuterie boards that cost more than my therapy sessions. Done. Saturday at 7. Prepare for aggressive support and cheese. Saturday came. The wine bar, called Cork and Barrel, because Boston couldn't resist obvious names, was packed with young professionals pretending they understood the difference between Malbec and Merlot. Lila showed up in a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than Hugh's monthly rent. Paige arrived late with apologies about her toddler's bedtime routine, and we secured a corner table that gave us privacy for the kind of conversation that would horrify nearby tables. So, Paige said, pouring us each a very full glass of Pinot Noir. Scale of 1 to 10, how satisfying was it watching Hugh's life fall apart? Solid 8, I said. Would have been a 10 if I'd gotten to witness the Tesla repossession in person. Lila snorted into her wine. I heard he's living in Somerville now, in a studio apartment. My friend Tessa saw him at Trader Joe's buying the sad single-person frozen meals. Stop, you're going to make me feel bad. No, we're not, Paige said firmly. He cheated on you with a junior colleague in your own bed. He deserves frozen tikka masala and loneliness. We clinked glasses. The wine was excellent. The company was better. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than efficient competence. I felt light. Like I'd been carrying weight I hadn't realized was there until it disappeared. Here's what I don't get, Lila said, leaning forward conspiratorially. How did you keep it together? I would have burned the apartment down. Honestly, I went into consultant mode, identified the problem, gathered evidence, executed a strategic solution. Hugh was just another bad acquisition that needed to be divested. That's the most romantic thing I've ever heard, Paige deadpanned. We laughed. The kind of laugh that comes from surviving something absurd and coming out better on the other side. The kind of laugh that says the worst is over and everything from here is bonus territory. My phone buzzed again. Email notification from Desmond. Client in biotech sector needs immediate M&A consult. Your specialty. Interested? I typed back, send me the details, I'm available. Lila raised an eyebrow. Working on a Saturday night? Building an empire on a Saturday night, I corrected. There's a difference. To empire building, Paige said, raising her glass. And to ex-husbands in studio apartments, Lila added. And to knowing your worth, I finished. We drank. The wine tasted like freedom and expensive grapes, and the absolutely certain knowledge that I'd made the right call walking into that conference room 3 weeks ago with pink silk evidence and zero hesitation. Hugh had underestimated me. Clarice had underestimated me. Probably half the people who knew us had underestimated me. But I'd never underestimated myself. And that made all the difference. Here's something nobody tells you about revenge. Sometimes it comes back for a second round without you even asking. 3 months after the divorce finalized, mid-February to be exact, I was in my office at Sterling Advisory Partners reviewing due diligence materials for a pharmaceutical acquisition when my personal cell rang. Unknown Boston number. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Vera Hartwell. Ms. Hartwell, this is Joyce Brennan from Barrett Sinclair's office. Mr. Sinclair asked me to reach out to you directly. Do you have a moment? Barrett. Calling me. This was either very good or catastrophically weird. I have 5 minutes. Mr. Sinclair wondered if you'd be available for coffee tomorrow morning. 10 a.m. at Thinking Cup in the Financial District. He said to tell you it's regarding Hugh Cross and it's in your interest to attend. My stomach did something complicated. Tell him I'll be there. I spent the rest of the day wildly speculating. Had Hugh done something else monumentally stupid? Was Barrett trying to poach me back? Had Clarice returned from Kansas City exile with some kind of revenge plot that only made sense to people with underdeveloped prefrontal cortexes? The next morning, I arrived at Thinking Cup 15 minutes early, because anxious overachievement is my factory setting. Barrett was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 coffees and an expression that suggested he'd rather be negotiating hostile takeovers than whatever conversation this was about to be. Vera, he said, standing. Thank you for coming. Barrett, you've successfully triggered my curiosity and mild paranoia. What's this about? He slid a manila folder across the table. Hugh Cross filed a lawsuit against my firm 2 weeks ago. Wrongful termination, hostile work environment, reputational damage. He's asking for $2.3 million in damages. I opened the folder. Legal documents, filed in Suffolk County Superior Court. Hugh's signature at the bottom, along with some attorney I'd never heard of who probably worked for contingency fees and desperation. He's suing you for firing him after he had an affair with a junior colleague in his marital bed and got caught during a client presentation? Essentially, yes. His argument is that the affair was consensual between adults, happened outside work hours, and that we terminated him without proper investigation or due process. He's claiming we created a hostile work environment by forcing his resignation under duress. I laughed. Actually laughed. That's the most delusional legal strategy I've heard since Enron executives claimed they didn't know about the fraud. Agreed. But here's where it gets interesting. Barrett pulled out another document. His attorney subpoenaed you as a witness. You'll need to testify about the events of that day. The confrontation, what you said, what evidence you presented. They're going to argue that you created a public spectacle that forced our hand and that we terminated Hugh based solely on your dramatic presentation rather than any actual investigation. So he's blaming me for his consequences. Precisely. I took a long sip of coffee. When's the deposition? 3 weeks. March 10th. Your attorney should coordinate with ours. I don't need an attorney for this. I have video evidence, timestamps, documentation, and 6 witnesses who saw Hugh freeze like a deer in headlights when confronted with his own infidelity. His case is garbage. I know, but I wanted to give you advance warning and to say thank you. For what? For handling it the way you did. You had every right to burn everything down. Instead, you were surgical, professional. You exposed the situation without making it about emotion. You made it about facts. That's why we referred those clients to Sterling. That's why I'm telling you now that if Hugh's attorney tries to paint you as some kind of vengeful spouse, we'll shut it down immediately. You did nothing wrong. Something warm spread through my chest. Vindication from someone who'd witnessed the whole disaster and still thought I'd handled it correctly. Barrett, I appreciate that, truly. But I'm not worried about Hugh's lawsuit. He's going to lose, and he's going to look pathetic doing it. Barrett smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him. That's what I thought. But I wanted you prepared. His attorney is apparently some guy named Elliot Marsh. Used to work personal injury, now does employment litigation. Real bottom feeder type. Perfect. Hugh hired a lawyer as mediocre as his decision-making. This should be entertaining. We finished our coffee. Barrett picked up the tab. Firm expense, he insisted, and we parted ways outside with a handshake that felt like closure on something I hadn't realized was still open. But here's what I didn't expect. Hugh's lawsuit turned into a gift. The deposition happened exactly 3 weeks later in a bland conference room that smelled like recycled air and broken dreams. Elliot Marsh turned out to be exactly what Barrett described. 50-something guy with a cheap suit, and the aggressive energy of someone who'd passed the bar exam on his 3rd try. Hugh sat next to him, looking like he'd been living on stress and regret. He'd lost weight. His suit didn't fit right. He looked older. I felt nothing. Marsh started with softballs. Ms. Hartwell, can you describe your relationship with Hugh Cross? We were married for 7 years, divorced as of November 17th. And the divorce was contentious? The divorce was efficient. The infidelity was contentious. Hugh flinched. Marsh pressed on. On October 28th, you entered a private business meeting and made certain accusations against Mr. Cross. Can you describe your motivations? I didn't make accusations. I presented evidence. There's a difference. What evidence? I smiled. A pink silk camisole that I found in my marital bed, size petite, belonging to Clarice Dunham, and 3 printed photographs from our home security camera showing Ms. Dunham leaving our bedroom at 6:47 a.m. on October 7th, wearing that same camisole. Time-stamped, high resolution, unambiguous. Marsh glanced at Hugh. Hugh was staring at the table like it might offer him an escape route. And you felt it necessary to present this evidence during a business meeting? I felt it necessary to return lost property. Ms. Dunham left her clothing in my home. I returned it at her workplace. I thought that was considerate. You embarrassed Mr. Cross in front of his colleagues and superiors. Mr. Cross embarrassed himself by conducting an affair with a subordinate employee and getting caught. I simply provided documentation. The deposition went on for 2 hours. Marsh tried every angle, painting me as vindictive, suggesting I'd orchestrated a public humiliation, implying I'd damaged Hugh's career out of spite. Every time, I calmly presented facts, dates, evidence, timeline. I sounded like I was testifying about a failed merger, not a failed marriage. At one point, Marsh asked, "Do you feel any remorse for the impact your actions had on Mr. Cross's professional life?" I looked directly at Hugh. I feel remorse that I wasted 7 years on someone who valued his career enough to risk mine through humiliation, but not enough to keep his pants on. As for his professional life, he destroyed that himself. I just provided witnesses. Hugh's attorney tried to object. The stenographer kept typing. Hugh looked like he wanted to disappear into the corporate carpeting. When it ended, Gwen, who'd attended as my attorney despite my protests, leaned over and whispered, "You just won his case for us." That was perfect. 2 weeks later, Marsh withdrew the lawsuit. No settlement, no negotiations. Just a 1-sentence filing that Hugh Cross was voluntarily dismissing all claims. Barrett called me personally to say the firm's attorneys suspected Marsh had finally watched the ring camera footage and realized his client was lying about ambiguous evidence. Hugh told his attorney you'd manipulated the situation, Barrett said. Then Marsh saw the video of Clarice leaving your bedroom in her underwear at dawn and realized Hugh had been, quote, aggressively minimizing the facts. Aggressively minimizing the facts. That's a generous way to say lying. Lawyers are generous with language. It's how we sleep at night. I hung up and immediately texted Lila and Paige. Hugh dropped the lawsuit. Turns out video evidence of your affair partner doing the walk of shame is hard to spin as ambiguous. Lila responded first. Ha 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 ha, dying. He really thought he could win? Paige. The audacity of mediocre men never ceases to amaze me. That evening, I treated myself to dinner at Ostra. The kind of overpriced seafood place where finance people go to celebrate closed deals and defeated enemies. I ordered the Dover sole, a bottle of Sancerre, and the creme brulee, because I'd earned all three. Halfway through my meal, my phone buzzed. LinkedIn notification. Hugh had updated his profile. New position, independent consultant, strategic advisory services. Independent consultant. Translation. Unemployed but trying to sound important. I smiled, took a bite of perfectly cooked fish, and thought about how satisfying it was that Hugh had tried one last time to make me the villain and failed spectacularly. Some people learn from their mistakes. Others file frivolous lawsuits and prove they haven't learned anything at all. Hugh, apparently, was the latter. 6 months after walking into that glass conference room with a pink camisole and a vendetta, I stood in my corner office at Sterling Advisory Partners watching the sunset over Boston Harbor and realized something unexpected. I'd stopped thinking about Hugh entirely. Not in the "I'm pretending I'm over it" way, in the genuine "he's become irrelevant to my daily existence" way. The way you forget about a bad restaurant you'll never visit again, or a movie you walked out of halfway through. My life had become unrecognizable in the best possible way. The pharmaceutical deal I'd been working on in February closed in April for $92 million. Desmond made me a junior partner in May, 2 months ahead of the timeline he'd originally projected. My client roster had grown to include 3 Fortune 500 companies and 2 biotech startups that would probably IPO within 18 months. I'd hired an assistant named Ivy, who was terrifyingly competent and made my professional life run like a Swiss watch. The Back Bay apartment got renovated. New furniture, new paint, 0 traces of Hugh's protein powder residue or questionable decorating choices. I'd turned his former home office into a reading room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a chair so comfortable it should be illegal. Mrs. Chen from next door brought me homemade dumplings once a week and updated me on neighborhood gossip I pretended not to care about but secretly loved. As for Hugh, last I heard through the Boston professional grapevine, which functioned with the efficiency of an intelligence network, he was still doing contract consulting work in Burlington, still driving that used Honda Civic, still living in the Somerville studio apartment. His LinkedIn showed exactly 0 new connections in 6 months, which in our industry was the equivalent of professional death. Clarice, meanwhile, had gotten married to her agricultural finance guy in Kansas City and changed her last name to something I didn't bother remembering. Her LinkedIn profile still listed her at Barrett's firm Kansas City office, where she was presumably learning valuable lessons about consequences and Midwestern humility. I felt nothing about either of them. Not satisfaction, not vindication, not even mild curiosity. They'd become characters in a story I'd already finished reading. Barrett called me in late April, purely social, which was unusual for him, and asked if I wanted to grab lunch. We met at Atlantic Fish Company, and over lobster rolls he said something that stuck with me. "You know what impressed me most about how you handled Hugh?" he said. "You never made it emotional. You treated the whole thing like a business problem that needed solving. Most people in your situation would have burned everything down. You just surgically removed the infection and moved on." It was emotional, I admitted, but I learned a long time ago that emotion without strategy is just noise. I was angry, furious actually, but fury without a plan is just screaming into the void. So I made a plan, and executed it flawlessly. I executed it efficiently. There's a difference. Flawless would have been not marrying him in the first place. Barrett laughed. Fair point, but you came out better than you went in. That's the definition of success in my book. He wasn't wrong. Financially, professionally, personally, every metric had improved. The divorce settlement gave me the apartment and freed me from Hugh's increasingly questionable financial decisions. The new job came with equity that would vest over 5 years. My network had expanded to include people who actually respected competence over connections. I'd started running again, something I'd abandoned during my marriage because Hugh complained that my 5 a.m. alarms disturbed his sleep. Now I ran the Charles River Esplanade 3 mornings a week and arrived at the office energized instead of resentful. I'd even started dating. Nothing serious, A few dinners with a software engineer named Calvin who made me laugh. Coffee with a corporate attorney named Silas who understood billable hours and deadline stress. Both knew I was divorced. Neither asked invasive questions, and I appreciated their basic human decency in not treating my failed marriage like entertainment. Lila asked me over brunch in May if I regretted how I'd handled everything. "Do you ever wish you'd done it differently?" she said, stealing a piece of my French toast. "Like, maybe confronted him privately instead of in front of his entire firm." I considered it. No, if I'd confronted him privately, he would have lied, minimized, made promises he wouldn't keep. Public accountability was the only thing that guaranteed real consequences. Would it have been kinder to do it quietly? Maybe. But kindness wasn't the goal. Closure was. And you got it? Completely. Hugh became a cautionary tale instead of my problem. That's worth more than kindness. Paige, who'd been listening quietly, raised her mimosa. To women who refuse to be doormats, and to ex-husbands who learn the hard way that actions have consequences. We clinked glasses. The sun streamed through the restaurant windows. Spring in Boston smelled like possibility and new beginnings, and the absolutely certain knowledge that I'd made the right choice. People ask me sometimes, usually women going through similar situations, if the revenge was worth it, if publicly destroying Hugh's career made me feel better, if I'd do it again. Here's the truth. It wasn't about revenge. It was about refusing to be complicit in my own disrespect. Hugh made choices. Clarice made choices. I simply made sure those choices had consequences that matched their impact. Would I do it again? In a heartbeat. Not because I'm vindictive, but because I learned something valuable. You teach people how to treat you. And sometimes the most important lesson you can teach is that you won't tolerate being treated poorly, no matter how uncomfortable that makes everyone else. The pink camisole? I donated it to Goodwill in March, exactly as planned. Someone in Boston is wearing it now, completely unaware of its history. I like to think it's bringing them better luck than it brought Clarice. As for Hugh, wherever he is, whatever he's doing, I genuinely hope he's learned something from this entire disaster. I hope he's become someone who values honesty over convenience and integrity over opportunity. But honestly, I stopped caring about his personal growth around the same time I stopped checking if he'd updated his LinkedIn. Some chapters end. You close the book, you put it on the shelf, and you move on to better stories. That's exactly what I did.